I'm Eric Brewer. I teach English at Leesville Road High School in North Raleigh.
Hi, I'm Crystal Simmons. I'm a doctoral student in social studies education and a former social studies teacher.
And we're here to do a close reading of the Gettysburg Address. I will be reading as a literary critic.
And I'll be reading as a historian. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. As a historian, I would recognize that Lincoln mentions the year 1776. Historian Matthew Pensker describes Lincoln as evoking a biblical certainty. What would make Lincoln so confident in his language? The Battle of Vicksburg won on the same day as Gettysburg.
As a literary critic, I would look at the metaphors that Lincoln uses, fathers and liberty, as a way for him to shape the rest of his speech about the birth of a nation, as well as the connotations of the word conceived, that these fathers and liberty both conceived this nation. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. So Lincoln switches tenses. He uses present tense here. We are engaged. We are met on a great battlefield. And he also uses that plural pronoun we to indicate that the entire nation is on this battlefield and that that entire nation is engaged in a great civil war.
Lee got away. As a historian, I would make the point that Gettysburg was a missed opportunity for the Union. General Meade did not pursue Lee at Gettysburg. 8 days after the battle, Lincoln wrote to Meade, "Again, my dear General, I do not believe you appreciate the magnitude of the misfortune involved in Lee's escape. He was within your easy grasp, and to have closed upon him would, in connection with our other late successes, have ended the war. This is what historians do. They use source material to support claims that they are making." We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that this nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. Lincoln's main focus is on preserving the Union at all cost. We can see this through his limited approach to abolition in an Emancipation Proclamation and his willingness to go soft on the South in the Reconstruction.
As a literary critic, I would look at this again as we have come to dedicate, but looking at that a nation might live. He mentions nation several times throughout this speech, so clearly he believes that the Union is strong, that the Union must remain strong, and he uses the word live again, or live, that the nation might live, indicating and connecting back to the introduction about the forefathers have conceived this and that liberty was the main point of the nation.
But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note, nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work, which they who fought here have thus so far nobly advanced. Here, Lincoln is encouraging citizens to think of the ways they can further promote the pursuit of liberty and equality through civic duty and sacrifice. Since Lincoln, several presidents and leaders of this country made the same call. For instance, Roosevelt said, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." Kennedy, "My fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." And Carter, "Too many of us now tend to worship self-indulgence and consumption. Human identity is no longer defined by what one does, but what one owns."
It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we were that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. As a literary critic, I'm first drawn to the idea that that is one long sentence broken up with dashes. Since this was a speech, but clearly Lincoln understood that it would be published and therefore read, the use of dashes indicate to his reading audience that those clauses within the dashes are of great importance. And it's there that he stresses to us again, this nation under God. And after that last dash, he says, by the people, of the people, by the people, and for the people. Again, understanding that it was the birth of, that liberty was the birth of the nation, and that it shall not perish from the earth.
Remember, Eric, this was published in newspapers in 1864, an election year.
Thanks for listening to our close reading.